Directly after a very hard and challenging workout, or a workout that was of longer duration, you need carbs. When your adrenaline level is high, you cannot break down fats and proteins. When your stress and your adrenaline is high and saying run, your body needs those carbohydrates because they're quick and then you can run away.
Hello and welcome to Soul Food. My name is Katharina Minwegen, and in this podcast I want to take you on a journey to ourselves and our own body, but also to everything that surrounds and nourishes us and everything that makes us happy. Let's explore this world with all its possibilities, and let's find out how we can all be part of an important change. For us, others, and this beautiful planet we all call our home. Once per week, I'm sharing my own thoughts and interview wonderful people who will inspire us with their ideas and their knowledge and invite us to think outside the box. Because traveling together is more beautiful than traveling alone, isn't it? Hey, and welcome back to Soul Food. So today's episode is the second part of the interview with the wonderful Sam. She studied nutritional medicine and Western herbal medicine, and today we will be talking about sports and nutrition. We will talk about the most important nutrients our body needs when we work out. We will talk about meal timing and about how incredibly important our digestion is. And as every week, I have a little quote for you. Kobe Bryant said, "Everything negative, pressure, challenges are all an opportunity for me to rise." And that is not only true when it comes to sports and the goals we may want to achieve. Everything in life is a question of perspective. You can always choose between seeing the hard part or the chance for growth and change. And that's a process. And yes, it can be quite uncomfortable to get out of your comfort zone. But in the end, life is so much more fun when we allow ourselves to grow and lift each other up. Sports and nutrition. I think in general, people who do a lot of sports, most of them might be into nutrition already. But what would you say in general, if we do sports, I guess there are some nutrients we need to focus on, or our body needs when we move. What kind of nutrients should we take care of a bit more? Where should we put our focus? Not really our focus onto, because I think it's also difficult to say, you just need this. I think it's individual again, but what would you say, what's really important to take care of when you do sports?
So when we're more physically active, it means we're upregulating our energetic metabolism. So to talk biochemistry, it's cellular respiration. So my mitochondria are producing ATP, which is what's making my muscle respond to push-pull. So we're upregulating that. And that pathway involves, so it involves some glucose, it involves some minerals and vitamins, so your water-soluble B vitamins. Everything that occurs in that cascade, it means you're using more of, so the enzymes are activated, the enzymes are built. So it's not just about the muscles needing the protein, but the enzymes are made up of protein. So that's why protein becomes a big topic. It's not to say that we should focus on one particular type of nutrient, but monitoring that, yes, we're upregulating the energy pathway, so I need more of the water-soluble nutrients, iron, magnesium, zinc, for example. Most athletes I know at some point notice that they're dehydrated.
Our body needs about 2 liters of water per day, but that amount varies. Our body is getting a part of the water from our food, especially from water-rich fruits and veggies. When we do sports, we lose a lot of water because we sweat. We actually sweat to downregulate our body temperature. While doing sports, you can lose between 0.5 and 3 liters per hour. So especially when you do high-intensity workouts, you should make sure to drink enough.
They're also getting the connective tissue breakdown that I talked about previously. So their nails will be breaking, or they'll notice indentations on their tongue or their skin or their hair. Their hair will be getting a bit dry, their skin, whether from doing sports outside in the environment. So it's all to do with that cell turnover. So you're more active. That's why I like working with athletes, is that the cell turnover is quite quick. So you need to nourish that, but you also know pretty quickly when you're missing something. So mineral-wise, there are specific symptoms that are often matched to certain nutrients, but the truth is no nutrient functions alone. So in terms of that, colours. So water-soluble nutrients come from vegetables and fruits. They do come from other sources, but predominant sources are these water-rich vegetables and fruits, and they in themselves are often great sources of these nutrients that we are frequently depleting when we're engaging in very high intensity or duration sports. So a lot of the athletes that I work with, we talk a lot about those, and vegetables and lentils and nuts and seeds that are quite concentrated sources of minerals are a frequent occurring topic. Definitely they are the sources of the micronutrients and antioxidants.
Now we're already talking about protein. I think that's such a common question. I mean, I'm vegan, so that's a very common question I get. Where do you get your protein from? Why is protein so important? What do we need it for?
So, I mean, we use proteins to build things. So yes, muscles in sports is the most common association, but we use them to build enzymes. The enzymes that break down our food are made up of proteins. The connective tissue that makes up our skin, our hair, our nails, they're all also made up of proteins. And certain nutrients are very important for helping the proteins link together. So often a lot of protein supplements contain zinc to help the chains basically link together. But the truth is, with protein, we will get protein in our foods because the plants that grow, they are also made up of proteins with the connective tissue. So we will get amino acids and we will collect them over the day based on the foods that we're eating, and our body will prioritize what it needs to do with those amino acids based on our activity.
There are 20 different amino acids, and 8 of them are classified as essential. That means they cannot be made by our body and must be obtained through the diet. Especially plant-based protein is often incomplete, which means it does not contain all 8 essential amino acids. But we do not have to get all of them in one meal. So when you make sure you eat a large variety of different plant proteins, you will be able to get all the essential amino acids your body needs.
And our state of health at that time. So our immune system, also the proteins that build our immune cells, they can also potentially be depleted or needing a bit more nourishment. So a lot of people talk about it in the context of muscle growth, but it is literally just day to day. You collect your protein over the day. And plant-based foods are also a very rich source of these amino acids that we build all of those essential materials with.
But how much protein do we actually need? And is it dangerous to eat too much protein?
Yes, it is dangerous to eat too much protein. And if you listen to your body, it's very hard to eat too much protein unless you're consuming artificial sources that your body's not able to respond to and give you the feedback for. So if we take protein supplements, if we're taking capsules, if we're taking powders, you're bypassing a lot of senses where the body would be able to regulate and say, oh, that's too much, or that's not the right form for me. So there's a risk there, but if you were eating foods, your appetite would regulate the volume of protein you're consuming. You wouldn't be able to eat that amount of lentils or meat or eggs or dairy products. You physically wouldn't be able to eat it. So generally our body systems are very good at regulating our appetite and seeking the protein sources that we need when we listen to the system, because we will have appetite for, I want tofu right now, or I want like a red lentil soup, or I would need something heavier, or I need something, you feel it. But the risk is that, yes, when we're taking artificial forms or supplements, or if it's protein that's prepared in a way that's covered with added salt, added fat, covered in sugars, where the body's getting like a visceral reaction to it when you put it in its mouth, then we can also overconsume prepared artificial combinations of meat, It happens with dairy as well. Your body's like, oh, I got the fat and the sugars, the consistency, I'm loving it. And then all of a sudden you've finished a whole big container that if you actually took the time to feel all the aspects of what you were eating, you would be really, really full and not be able to consume it. So there is a risk there that can happen with food. And if we ate naturally prepared meat, you wouldn't be able to eat a very, very high protein because you would feel sick. But that's the problem with also processed meats. Even animal alternative products, they're in combinations you wouldn't find in nature. So your taste perception isn't picking up on what's in it. So yes, but you will feel pretty sick and you will have digestive symptoms if you're overdoing it.
Yeah. What about carbohydrates? Because I think that's another big topic, and I think so many people, I think especially, well, maybe not even especially women, but I hear so many people saying, I can't eat carbohydrates because they will make me fat. Is that true?
No. The body makes us fat. It's not the carbohydrates' fault. So for people that do have the sort of mindset of thinking like one group of a macronutrient can cause the body to not be the way we want it to be, my response is our body responds to what we do. So part of what we do is, yes, what we eat. Carbohydrates include salad. Vegetables are a source of carbohydrates. So we're getting carbohydrates in a variety of foods. And the thing about carbohydrates is, in nature, carbohydrates are a source of water-soluble nutrients and antioxidants. Carbohydrates are wonderful. They are concentrated treasure troves of wonderful material that helps our body heal. Carbs are not bad, but the word carbs is a label to processed food groups. That's a different carb. So when someone says to me, oh, I don't do carbs, I'm like, well, everyone does carbs. You can't not do carbs, because all the foods you eat are going to have some carbohydrates in it. There's no such thing as not doing carbs. But for those who are doing diets that are sort of very low portion, keto style, you can lose a large amount of weight in a short period of time, but there are other consequences.
We all heard about the so-called yo-yo effect. Especially after being on a hypercaloric diet and losing a lot of weight in a short time, this effect does arise. That's the reason why restrictive diets should be avoided. This extreme food deprivation is not only associated with fat loss, but also with muscle loss. But when the diet is over, you will more likely put on fat, as this is the natural starvation response of the body. Changes in the fat to muscle ratio are associated with many different diseases. Therefore, weight loss should be a slow process, achieved through long-term diet and lifestyle changes.
The thing with carbs and the types of foods that you're finding those energy sources from, it's very important timing and combination. In regards to sports nutrition, directly after a very hard and challenging workout, or a workout that was of longer duration, you need carbs. When your adrenaline level is high, you cannot break down fats and proteins. When your stress and your adrenaline is high and saying run, your body needs those carbohydrates because they're quick and then you can run away. So if you're in fight-flight response, you need carbs. They are important. When you're calm, your body builds, glucose from other materials. So when you're nice and relaxed and you're breathing, when you've got a posture, you're nice and straight, your back's, your lungs are open, you're sitting and you're breathing calm, you're getting a lot of oxygen, your body is able to get what it needs from a variety of sources. When you're engaged in very long duration sports or very high intensity sports, or you're in a high stress, that includes racing to the bus or the train, that includes, running here or there, wherever, in your day-to-day, you might not think that's not, really sports, but the movement and the stress associated with the movement. You need carbs following that. So I believe a mistake that a lot of people do is they suppress their feelings over the day and consume their meals. And then at the end of the day, the body goes, finally I'm in a safe space. Give me a mountain of carbohydrates. That's the trick. So the carbs don't make us fat, but if you consume a lot of carbohydrates and then you don't move for many hours, the hormonal response that comes out of that will lead to fat storage, because the body knows how valuable that material is and it's not going to just get rid of it easily unless we move. You have to move it. So the thing is with carbohydrates is timing. So after a lot of movement is a good time to consume carbohydrates. A lot of people do sports and then have their protein shake. I am going to say something very controversial and say, don't do that. The protein is needing to be broken down and absorbed, and you want the protein and amino acids to be in your body before you engage in activity that could potentially lead to muscle breakdown, because your body heals as it goes. It doesn't break down muscle and then you eat a protein source and then all of a sudden it's, uploading again like on a video game. It doesn't work like that. Your body has the amino acids. It breaks it down into the pieces that it uses to put together what it needs. And as you're training and as you're doing whatever movements you're doing and sprinting here and there, your body is getting injured and healing as it goes. If you're going to have a protein supplement or a high protein meal, I would not do it after the workout. I would do it prior, and then allow your body the time to get the material into a form that it needs to be able to quickly access it and do its best work. So I would say if you're engaging in sports in the afternoon, you would put the higher protein foods earlier in the day, breakfast, lunchtime, when you can sit and eat the meal properly. If you're engaging in sports early in the morning, focus on your dinner and add some more protein portion to your dinner, because that protein is what's fueling your adaptation in the training the next day. So over several hours, I would recommend that. So in a window, at least 2.5 to 3 hours prior to sports, I would do the higher protein portion, up to 12 hours. So if it's the day before, which is totally not what everyone hears, but I'm putting it out there. And carbohydrate wise, I would put the carbohydrates directly following the sport. So if you're doing a lower intensity sport, you can do it high intensity, but I believe it's more efficient to do a sort of lower intensity, longer duration. And you can do that fasting, because you can breathe. As long as you can breathe, you're doing aerobic respiration, you have oxygen, you're breaking down fatty acids for energy. If you run out of fatty acids, you can also use protein for energy. If your blood sugar is getting low, your body's always going to maintain the homeostasis, that it has sufficient blood sugar. And if you don't, you will feel sick and hungry. Generally, you will feel hungry before it gets too low. People do suppress that feeling, but your body does tell you, ooh, alarm bell, I'm not quite getting enough of it. And usually if you don't consume the energy source, your body will just slow down. You can't go that fast. You can't do that interval without feeling dizzy. So your body will force you to slow down so that it can get what it needs from other sources. So I would put the carbohydrates at the end of the training session or the high movement. So if you're running to work in a meeting, have a little bit of something sweet, like after you've done a sprint to get there on time. Have something in your bag, a piece of fruit, some berries, some fennel that I talked about earlier. So that's also a carbohydrate. So it doesn't have to be chips and the sweet things. It can also be some fruit and vegetables, something raw, because then it gives you the water. And if you're running and you're sweaty, anything that contains water as well is going to be beneficial and make it easier to absorb the nutrients out of it. Put them earlier in your day, and you'll gradually notice that you don't crave carbohydrates as much in the evening. But put the carbohydrates where your movement is. That's the only issue I have with carbohydrates. It's just put in the wrong place. They're not bad. But if you're sitting down and your body's finally relaxed at the end of the day and you're consuming the chocolate and the chips and the things that are crunchy and melting in your mouth, and then you're still after, that's a very confusing message. It happens because finally the cortisol is down, finally the adrenaline is down, the body goes, I'm in a safe space. Now that I'm in a safe space, I can actually digest and taste and experience food, rather than rushing to scoff it down. I know I have the time now that I can just sit with it. The problem is also that we're so tired, usually by then it's too late, and the body goes, I don't want to eat anything that I have to prepare. It's like mentally we say that, but also the body says, just whatever.
Give it to me.
Yes, I've been deprived all day. Just give me stuff that's going to melt in my mouth so that I don't need to digest it. So the chips melt in our mouth, the chocolate melts in our mouth, the little snack things that we grab out of the cupboard and just open, the food industry makes it to melt in our mouth. And then the serotonin rushes in our brain and we just go, that's better. But if we actually put the foods that help us feel like, earlier in the day, the feedback system craving that food wouldn't be as highly activated at that time. So I've done this also with a lot of clients where, they said, I need this particular type of food that I would perhaps say it's not necessarily healthy, but I would never deprive someone of something that helps them feel well, but I would shift it. And the thing is, they'll eat a smaller portion of that food at that time of day, and then later in the day they'll feel like, oh, I don't actually need as much, or I'll just have one. I don't actually need 5, or I'll, just have a piece. I won't have the whole container full because I feel fine. Actually, I already got what I needed earlier. So and then you notice I had people do this with drinks. Actually, I know we're going to do short of time, but a very good example I have in this for carbohydrates is my husband. This is a funny story. When we met, he loved Apfelschorle, 1.5 liters a day.
Wow, and that's a lot.
And a lot of coffee. So 6 coffees a day. Apfelschorle and coffee. So no breakfast. And I introduced the idea that actually water, like Apfelschorle with the blood sugar and the water and the not having a proper meal.
Many studies showed that fruit juices have a negative influence on our health compared to the consumption of whole fruits. The problem is that during the manufacturing process, the fiber and many other nutrients get lost. Also, fruit juices contain a lot of sugar, and the blood sugar levels rise very fast after drinking them. That is one reason why people who consume a lot of fruit juice have a higher risk to be diseased with diabetes type 2. Water and unsweetened teas are always the better choice.
That does affect muscle growth, and he played football. He wants to have powerful football, and I just introduced the idea that does actually have an effect on your football performance, and it has an effect on your focus in the office and your mood and your motivation. Not to sort of say it's not a good thing, I'm just pointing out that does actually influence that. So perhaps if you're craving the Apfelschorle, maybe you reduce, like when you drink it, you pour some out and add some water to it so it's a bit diluted. And over time, he gradually diluted the Apfelschorle to the point that he can't drink Apfelschorle anymore, he just drinks water. And because he wasn't drinking the sugar-consuming Apfelschorle, the taste in his mouth had changed, therefore he didn't want to drink the coffee. So
Wow.
Instinctively, he stopped drinking the coffee and just had 1 a day after breakfast instead of the 6 over the day. And the side effects of that were he had more endurance at football, he woke up fresher and had appetite for breakfast, he didn't eat as many carbohydrates in the evening, and he lost weight, which for my mother-in-law, she is now, when we visited his mother, so after a period of 3 months of this transition phase, he'd lost 10 kilos. He was much more physically, because his diet had changed and he was playing football with more energy, his posture had changed, he was looking more built and more healthy. He looked very different.
Wow.
And her response when he knocked on the door was, what happened in 3 months? You look totally different. He just said, I started eating a bit differently and drinking a little bit less Apfelschorle, and now, but it's just planting the seed of the motivation. It's not about the diet. It's about your performance at work, your performance at sports, your performance over the day, and how productive you are and things that you're passionate about, and how much energy you're able to contribute to that. You just plant that little seed. And the sugar consumption, it was a revolution. It completely changed just because he wasn't having that sugar input so regularly over the day. It completely changed.
That's impressive.
It was very impressive.
You talked about digestion already. How important, because we can eat the healthiest food. If we can't digest it, then it can be the healthiest food, but it would still not do its job.
We don't get what we need, yeah.
So how important is our digestion?
More important than our diet. Yeah, very, very important. So there should be a lot of stomach appreciation. And one of the best ways we can appreciate our stomach is to chew our food and to eat food that we need to chew. So having a look at how many things we eat that melt in our mouths and try to switch that out for some things that we have to chew. Because the longer amount of time that it spends in your mouth, so the time between you interacting with the food, you smell it, you see it, you want it, and then you put it in your mouth and you let it spend some time in there before you swallow it, there is a whole miraculous biological reaction that occurs. So the saliva is getting produced, you're having hormone feedback, nerve feedback, you're having all kinds of input, and the senses inside of your mouth are very potent and very strong. And your tongue, if it gets longer to interact with the food, it sends messages to the rest of your organs to say, right, we have this many carbohydrates, we have this much protein, we have this much fat, so stomach, please produce some more of these enzymes. Liver, we're going to need a bit more bile from you. Pancreas, okay, get the amylase going. So your tongue is basically going, guys, good stuff here, power up. And you will sit and chew the food and it'll break down further, and then by the time it gets to your stomach's going to be getting it in this chewed form. The saliva is mixed through with it, so you've got this whole enzyme reaction with the food from your body before it reaches the stomach, and the body gets it and goes, oh yes, okay, I can definitely unravel these protein chains, wonderful. Okay, you've already started to break down the carbohydrates, the saliva provided the amylase, so the carbohydrates are in a form that I can easily transition into a form that we can really do some good work with. But if we eat food that melts in our mouth and we swallow it very quickly because it's so delicious, ice cream and the bars of things, they just go down. But by the time it gets to your stomach, your mouth didn't get to send the feedback. You didn't get enough time in your mouth to know all the components. And then your stomach goes, oh, I'm not really ready for this. The enzymes are not necessarily the best match that they could be. They're not as responsive as they could be because you didn't spend enough time interacting with it. And then you're not going to get as much out of it. And a lot of people don't look in the bathroom, but a lot of the time, a lot of the food that we put in goes out the way it came in because our body just went, oh, well, it's not chewed properly, it's not broken down properly, I was not prepared, the enzymes were not able to do anything with that. So, it's a waste of money that I spent on the food, it's a waste of time that I spent eating the food, and it's work for your body to identify that, okay, well, that has to go out again. So it's just an energy investment that we could better allocate. So we can experiment with foods, we can swap foods out, and posture and breathing is very important because, of course, all those organs are sitting in there. So if we change our chair, add a cushion, shift the way our posture is, recognize our breathing, taking the time to breathe before a meal, smelling the food before we put it in our mouth, and just think about the chewing. We are doing very, very good things for our digestive system and really complementing the whole process to get the most out of what we eat. And then we notice we don't need to spend as much time eating because we get more out of the food that we do eat. And we are able to maintain our balance much easier without needing to invest as much time in shopping and cooking and the process of having the meal. So yes.
Yeah, and I mean,
big fan.
yeah, and in the end, I mean, it's so clear that when you can't digest the food you are eating, that also has a big impact on the performance. Because of course, I mean, you can do sports, but if your body is not getting the nutrients it needs, then it's
a lot of work of digesting the food that takes up a lot of energy. But then you're not getting what you need, and then you're taking the supplements, which are also not necessarily the best form because there's a whole dynamic of interaction with the nutrients and the taste and the flavor and the enzymes. So where we can, we should get it from food. But when we're in a state of deficiency, we're not going to be able to upregulate the systems that we need in order to get enough of that nutrients in order to address whatever the issue is. So short-term supplementation is very effective when you've identified there's an issue while you address the issue until you can get out of your food again. And when we have undigested food that wasn't broken down properly, that is, something that's not supposed to be in that part of the digestive tract. It's supposed to be broken down in a specific form before it gets to our small intestine. And then you have all this issue of dysbiosis and leaky gut and all the topics of microbiome that we hear a lot about affecting our immune system. So the material we're putting in our mouth, if we don't give our body time to do its best work, it actually becomes the source of injury because we didn't allow the system to do its best work and prepare for what was coming. And that also makes a lot more work for the body to filter out what is potentially harmful and what's not. And then you're upregulating your immune system, developing allergies, mood, sleep disturbances. And then a lot of that can come from just, I didn't eat anything to chew, or I wasn't chewing my food properly. And
how important are breaks between meals, because we talked about that as well.
Exactly.
I mean, we all constantly, I feel like, especially when you are working, when I'm at the office, it's always like there's always something around. Like it's either chocolate or some nuts or whatever. But how important is it to have breaks between your meals?
So you've got to let the stomach get it. It's called a bolus, that the body gets the food into a specific form that has to have a specific pH in order to move into the next phase of digestion. So if you're constantly eating, you're constantly reintroducing new material into that mixture. So your body's trying to get it in a functional form that it can use, and you're constantly putting in new material, which is influencing the pH, which is changing the enzyme response, which is interfering with all of that. So you're potentially delaying your absorption of the food, which is, going to potentially contribute to constipation or heartburn or cramps in your stomach, especially for athletes who are often eating quickly, or they're just getting what they can grab to fuel whatever sport they're about to do. They often eat the food, but the body doesn't get the energy from the food until much, much, much later. And it's not actually fueling their sports, and they're not getting the most out of the time that they're investing in training. So for me, it's a lot about working out what's going to be most efficient for people. So if I don't have anything with me and I'm in a location where I have limited options, I need to know my options. So where can I buy something? What's the next best thing? And so if I'm caught off guard, then I know where to go, and I know my body and how long it's going to sit in my stomach and how long I need to digest it. Do I need half an hour? Is this a food that I can just sort of swallow and absorb and it melts in my mouth and I know what effect it has on me? Or do I really have the time that I can invest and sit and have a proper meal, maybe 2-3 hours before the sports, and don't have any pre-sport because I know I'm adequately fueled? I've experimented a lot myself with this, doing marathons and half marathons and 10Ks, and testing my time based on my pre-training meal, my pre-training dinner. And I have a lot of athletes who have digestive issues because of the stress, because of the rushed eating, because of the lack of chewing, because of the protein bars and the material that they're just buying pre-packaged. But they're also working, they're also, got families, and they're definitely time pressed.
Even though we are time pressed, we should always think about that, especially when it comes to sports, we want our body to perform. So how can we think it is performing in its best way possible if we do not nourish our body the best way possible? When I go grocery shopping, I really try to ask myself, what would be good for my body? And that does not mean that you have to stop eating chocolate or other unhealthy things, because we also have to nourish our soul. It is just about the awareness behind it.
It means that their organs are not able to do their best work, which means they're not getting the nutrients out of their food that they need, which is a lot of energy work for the body to break it down and eliminate it. Plus, then they need to invest in supplements and things to make up for what's not working in the process. So a lot of my work is coming up with solutions for them. No one has the same, there's no right way to do it. It's just going, okay, what's your situation? What's the environment? What have we got? And how can we make the best of it? And most people know themselves. They'll say, my perfect day, my perfect race, my perfect training would be this scenario. And then we collect examples of times that have really not worked, where I felt sick, or I felt fatigued or lightheaded, or I had blood pressure issues, or it was my worst race ever, whatever happened, that they were feeling nauseous. So we come up with the scenarios where we know that doesn't work. And we come up with solutions for those and go, okay, we knew that didn't work well, but if such a situation comes up again, we've got pieces that we can put in place in order to, even though it's never going to always be the best case scenario, we still know what the next best thing is and how your body processes the food.
Yeah.
So everyone's enzymes are different because everyone's circumstances are different. So there is no pre-workout formula that's right for everyone, depending on the sport. There is no pre-workout nutrient cocktail that's right for everyone, because your whole system is functioning differently from everyone around you. So we need to look at the whole package, which is why you need to have specialists really looking at things before you play around too much, because the risk is you're going to do harm. If you take something big away and replace it with something else without supervision, you could really hurt yourself. So I'm a big fan of talking to a lot of people and talking to people who can collect more about the whole picture, who don't just know you through your training, who's not just your coach for sports, but who knows your living situation and your working situation and your day-to-day stuff. The results in your sport is a reflection of your day-to-day. You didn't do well in the race because you did the right thing on the day. You don't do well in your race because you trained well. It's because your daily routine suits your energy flow. It's the whole rhythm in all the time that led up to that. So it's not about when you did the sports, it's all the stuff around the time that you were active, the hours before and the hours after. How did you recover? Did Did you stretch? Did you sleep well? Did you talk to friends and laugh? Did you read a book that makes you feel excited and adventurous? Everything that's affecting your flow and your mindset is also going to affect your digestion. So the digestion is what's going to deliver you what you need for your cells in order to react as quickly as we want them to. Yes, we need to look at the whole scenario.
Yeah, it's super interesting because, again, I think that's one of the most important messages, that we all have to listen to our body, but it's not only the way we eat, it's also the general way we treat our bodies.
Yes.
Because when we have the wrong mindset, we can eat super healthy, but we would still not feel the way we could feel if everything would be in balance.
It's about safety. The body doesn't feel safe. I don't feel like I have the time and the space to do what I could do best with this. It's as anything that's creative, breaking down food is actually a very creative process of the body. It's transformation. You're transforming a material into something completely different that your body is going to do some pretty amazing things with, because that is where you're directing your life energy flow. So when you put that in, you want to sort of, I'm very passionate. I've been doing it for a lot of years. I'm really into it, obviously. So it's something something we should really treasure. And it's very powerful. And it's literally just finding where we put that space and recognizing this is my power. This is fueling my power. So, and my body is transforming this. This is not the source of my power. When I eat this food isn't giving me energy. My body is creating energy out of what I'm eating. So, but I need to create the space in order to allow that creative process. Yeah, I would say test yourself. So try the different sports and try it fasting and see how you feel when you're fasting. Because sometimes people are impressed and go, actually, I performed better when I hadn't eaten, for 3 hours or 6 hours before or 12 hours before. Some people say, actually, I'm in an anaerobic respiration. I'm very good at metabolizing fats. Some people say, no, I need to eat every 3 hours. But you can experiment on yourself and you can feel it and go, I know what I did there and I know how I felt and I recognize this is my recipe for success. So we did this actually with a group who did an ultra marathon, and I did the diet plan. So we had 6 runners doing distances day and night through the desert, and I looked at each person and we looked at potential vitamin D deficiency, protein intake, vegan, non-vegan, preferences for different types of foods, and we came up with what do they need to take with them. And every single person, male, female, tall, higher muscle mass, lower muscle mass, we looked at their whole condition, and every single person had completely different requirements at different times, different frequencies of meals, and we did separate packs for each person. And they were completely different and fascinating, and also from different backgrounds, different countries, different cultures. So we had someone from Japan, we had someone from America and Europe, and just the different energetic systems. They all break down their food differently, and it takes them a different amount of time. So in order to need to experiment with that and calculate for what my energy requirement is to engage in this sport, and for the duration of time that I need that energy, and the pace that I'm going to be doing, how do I fuel that? And so those sort of more extreme sports are a great example of how you can really experiment on how the body responds and absorbs food, and how that, whether or not they're able to get to sleep. They've got 3 hours to sleep before they need to do another run, and how does the body adapt to that sort of situation, and how do you fuel that? So I've had a lot of sort of examples like that where I've really been able to test the theory. You might read research, you might read a case study, you might do experiments on yourselves or your clients, but then it's really the experience of very different scenarios of different types of people. And if you do a nutrition study and you have a group of people and you're testing a theory on sports medicine, you're never going to have that scenario repeat in the day-to-day. So it's very hard to look at that data and go, oh, well, they ate this type of diet and they did this sort of sport and they performed great. But you're not in that situation in real life. I don't have someone catering for me every day. I'm not going to use those products day to day. So, and you're not in that situation. So looking at the data as well, it's very hard to just translate that over and say, well, that's totally relevant to what we're doing, because that's no context of what your situation is and what your lifestyle is and what country that you're in and your age group and your sports history or your health condition. You know, a lot of the studies are done on people who have no prior conditions. As soon as you throw something in, like, I have a knee injury that I've been using ibuprofen for, that's going to affect your digestion on your stomach. So I have to look at your stomach's digestion. You've been taking medication that affects your stomach. I've had an operation recently. I'm still recovering from an infection. I've been on antibiotics. That's also going to affect your protein digestion and absorption. It's also going to affect how many minerals are absorbed out of your food. And, you know, so there's all these kinds of factors that you need to have someone who's able to take all that into consideration and work as part of a team and talk with you without dictating what you should be doing. Because it literally is how you're feeling and your environment, and especially with athletes, it's always more complicated than what you will ever see in a study. You cannot take a research study or an article and just cut and paste it, because that situation never occurs.
Yeah, because it's too complex.
It's too many variables, and you cannot control those variables. It's too many variables, and I don't know many athletes who don't have a lot of other stuff going on in their day-to-day. So if you just talk about the food relative to when they're doing sports, you're cutting out like 99.9% of what's really relevant and influencing their performance. So if I understand their sleeping pattern and other external factors that they may not be my specialty, but maybe I can refer them on to someone or some resources that they can work on that. And then while that's happening, that I can support them in stuff that they can immediately feel better about. If I come up with an idea to help them with a solution for their next training session, and they engage in that exercise and they feel awesome, and they're like, you know what, I could do another round and I don't even have any muscle pain. And then in the 2 to 3 days later, I didn't have any muscle pain. That means I could train again with a higher intensity because I didn't need the recovery time anymore, because I'm adapting more efficiently, which makes me get excited because I feel like I can make more progress in a different time frame, and then I'm looking for the next challenge and feeling more empowered in other aspects of my life. It's not about the sport, it's the whole thing. I'm feeling better at work, I'm more relaxed at home, I'm feeling more recovered from everyday stress that otherwise was creating a burden for me. So the flow-on effects are what get me really excited, not just the results of the sports, but the people who come back and say, I just feel better, like in whole other levels that I hadn't comprehended were possible before. And that's very exciting, and it doesn't have to be complicated, but you need to take a lot of things into consideration before you tell people what they should change.
Yeah. One last question, because you were just talking about muscle pain and muscle soreness is, I think, something nobody really likes.
Yeah.
But I guess that food also impacts maybe the level of muscle pain we feel.
And the duration. Yeah. How sore am I?
Yeah.
And how long am I going to be sore? And like the flow-on effect, you might be sore in one muscle group, but then you do a compensation that you move a bit differently, and then other muscle groups start to be sore that are a compensation for the original muscle pain. It can be quite a flow-on effect. So my main thing is telling athletes, you know, muscle regeneration, the most important vital time for that is your sleep time, your deep sleep. So the sleep quality you had before and after, like a high impact, is very important. The meal timing influences your sleep, of course. So if you eat late, it's going to influence the hormones that bring you into deep sleep. So the melatonin, the cortisol, the blood sugar levels, the nutrients, you know, that are supporting the function of those hormones. So I'm not a fan of eating high carbohydrate right before bed. Shift that to directly after the sports, where your body is able to soak up very quickly and absorb when you're in that state of like high energy requirement. And watching that you're not sort of snacking like all the way into the evening. Go to bed earlier, and if you're not tired, breathe, stretch. I spoke to a colleague recently who's an orthopedic surgeon. He was asking me, because someone was asking him, is stretching or the post-workout meal more important? My answer is the stretching is most important. Stretch, come down from the adrenaline, eat some food when the adrenaline's a bit lower. So don't eat anything other than carbohydrates when you're in that high energy flow, when you're still sweating, when you're still producing the heat. Just have like some fruit or whatever, but just simple carbohydrates. Your body comes down from the adrenaline, you start to feel calm and relaxed again, then have a nice well-rounded protein-rich, good fats, omega-3 source fats, meal full of taste where you've relaxed enough that your senses are picking up how it tastes and how it feels, and that you can take the time to eat it. And try to close the kitchen ideally a couple of hours before you go to bed. That you eat sufficient amount of food in that meal, and you sit and you take the time to digest it to a point that you're not hungry for that period of time, and it allows your body to get into the state where it's able to flow into the wave of falling asleep. Muscle regeneration is going to occur overnight. If that transition phase was not optimal, you will wake up in a lot of pain. Not to say that you will wake up in bad pain. There's like good muscle pain. I'm like, oh, I've got muscle pains, but it's productive. It's good pain. Yeah, I did that workout, and I can feel the muscle growing.
Yeah,
it's good growing muscle strength pain. It's a happy pain. It's not obstructing my movement. It's there, but I'm kind of enjoying it because it's the satisfaction of knowing, yeah, I did well yesterday. I pushed myself to that limit, and I'm feeling it in a good way. Versus, oh my goodness, rolling out of bed is agony. I can't
move.
I can't do the back of my shirt up, kind of feeling. That's not really productive. Inflammation is helpful and normal, but when you're having 2-3 days of pain that's really causing restriction in movement, there is potential, injury risk with that, because you're shifting how you move and you're not in balance, and you're responding to acute pain. So most importantly, in regards to nutrition, is how that influences your bedtime, and that you're not eating food to make your muscle pain better. So you do get pain relief from food. There are foods that, Nutella, I have to do a name drop there, is a very popular one with a lot of athletes that I know that they're consuming a tub of Nutella. If you eat a meal that's rich in omega-3, magnesium, plant-based proteins, antioxidants, and it's fresh, it's green, it's crunchy, it's seasonal, the anti-inflammatory effects of that meal are better than any anti-inflammatory medication you could take.
In principle, we need both omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids. Omega-6 fatty acids are pro-inflammatory and are needed for wound healing, amongst other things. Omega-3 fatty acids, however, are anti-inflammatory. They're contained in linseed oil and fish, for example. But also algae are a good plant-based source. Omega-6 fatty acids are mostly contained in high-processed meat and other animal products. The ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 should be smaller than 2.5 to 1. But especially because of our Western diet, the ratio is more likely at 15 to 1. And that can cause severe health damage.
So if you think, I'm going to do a pro-inflammatory sports session, and my meal after that, I'm going to have like a salad with some sweet potato and some mung beans and some lentils, and I'm going to do preferably plant-based meal directly after, because it's got the form of the protein. It's easy to digest carbohydrate, and the protein form is easier to break down for the body. And you'll benefit from omega-3 fatty acids, which are supporting the inflammatory process so that it's productive, and that the cell membranes are more responsive to absorb things that they need, and that they're not so inflamed and reactionary, which means the muscle cells, as they're healing and knitting themselves back together, are a bit sort of more quiet as they're doing it, because they've got what they need, and the inflammation, the fire has calmed down. It's basically having a very green, crunchy, fresh, seasonal meal, plant-based mostly, I would recommend, and then trust your appetite. So if you are otherwise eating meat products and eggs and dairy, wait a little bit longer, because they're heavier foods, and your system's going to need a different type of energy in order to break that down. So you'd maybe do that a couple of hours or a bit further away from the workout. And ideally don't eat those really heavy foods directly before bed, because it's going to sit heavy in your stomach, and it's not as productive as it could be. Rather eat those foods when you can sort of move around a little bit more and not just sit on the couch after.
I think we all know that feeling when we had a big steak or whatever, and we just feel like, that's gonna sit in my stomach for days.
Yes, it's heavy, and it often does. For a lot of people, it does sit in there for a good. I think there was a study, I can also give it the link. There was a study where they examined the digestion time for women and men and the times of day. And there were certain types of proteins and meals and foods. It wasn't a big study group, but it was just a good execution of looking at how long does it actually take for my body to get rid of the stuff that I don't need after consuming that. And of course, with animal-based foods, it's quite a process, and it takes a lot of energy for the body. And often the plant-based foods, they have a bit of a faster turnover. There's a lot of fiber, and it helps the body kind of sift through a bit quicker. And if you're eating animal-based foods, there's a lot of volume in a small portion in terms of protein and other nutrients, because you're eating the cells of another animal. There's a lot of material in there that the body's got to unpack, and so it takes time. So it's not better or worse, it just takes a different amount of time, and depending on your digestive system, it responds more or less efficiently to that based on genetic factors, epigenetics, environment, other things that you're dealing with day to day. But yeah, for some people it takes 24 hours, 48 hours, 3 hours. That could be just sitting in your system for days, and yeah, you're feeling a bit heavy for those days. It's literally a lot of weight that's not really doing much to contribute to your energy. It's just sitting and making your body feel a bit heavy until you're in a safe environment where your body can release it, basically. And it's good to know which foods take time. So cauliflower, for me, for example, is a food that I don't process very well, and it takes several days for me to get that energy out. So I try to avoid, especially raw cauliflower. I don't know a lot of people who eat raw cauliflower. I eat a lot of things raw, or I like to experiment. And so I've figured out different types of foods that are animal-based and plant-based that I recognize, that's going to take a long time for my system to deal with that, and therefore portion control. It's just don't eat too much of it. And just be aware that if I do, it's going to be there for a while. Yes.
Yeah, and again, just experiment and find out what feels good for you.
Yes.
And I have one last question. Rituals really help me to find balance in my everyday life. So I find it really interesting to see what kind of rituals other people use to, be more relaxed, maybe find that connection. Doesn't have to be a daily ritual, but do you have things that help you to calm down and find that inner peace?
Yes. So these are things that I do regularly. I did gymnastics when I was younger, so I got in the habit early of stretching. So I am very conscious of opening up my lungs. So you don't breathe just up and down in your diaphragm, you also breathe out from your ribs and out through your back. So I'm frequently, and of course I'm busy with 2 kids at home, and I'm working and doing a lot of different activities over the day. I make sure I check in and I open myself up. So it's very easy when you're concentrating on other people, you close down and you curve in. So I'm very conscious of opening up my body and basically behaving as if I had wings on my back and I could fly wherever I wanted to at any moment. And part of that is filling myself up with air and feeling the energy flow of oxygen rushing through. And you can hear my baby in the background. So if I'm with the kids and I'm busy and I'm focused or I'm preparing a meal, I'm frequently breathing and doing sort of mindful breathing. And as I'm mindful breathing, I'm opening up my chest and placing my hands on the back of my ribs and feeling myself expand. I'm creating space within myself. So I do that pretty frequently over the day. I create space within myself to allow more energy flow, so that I'm less irritable and I'm less reactive to things that would otherwise, if I was feeling too closed in, I might be reactive to in a stress, or if I feel stress building up, I recognize, I'm caving in here. I'm feeling a burden of many things. So I'll just open it up. Tea, drinking my cup of tea. So putting my feet up and drinking a cup of tea. That's again creating space. And if I'm having a hard time, I immerse my feet. I don't have to do a cold shower or anything, but I immerse my feet in cold water. So I'll fill up a bucket or a bath or wherever I am. If I'm feeling emotional, I'm a very big thing with sort of, I'm stressed, I'm reaction, I'm nervous, whatever. I'll just put my feet in water and it sort of takes you out of your head.
I like that.
Yeah, so I'll just get a bucket of water, whatever I can do to put my feet in water. The deeper, the better, but it doesn't really matter. And that forces me to be like here, now. And there's a lot of sensory stuff on the bottom of your feet.
Yeah.
So anyone who studied reflexology knows, the connection and Chinese medicine and the organs and the meridians. So if I put my feet in cold water, I'm back in reality and I'm able to focus on, all right, what's useful, what's functional, and I'm here and everything is fine no matter what. And I find that also a very good emotional release. It forces you, especially the cold water, makes you go and that creates a shift that's very powerful. So if I'm overwhelmed in any situation, if I'm overwhelmed, that's a ritual that I find very important. And it's very easy to do because most of the time you have access to flowing water and there's a bucket or something, even if it's a sink, just get a little stool up and whatever and I just put my feet in cold water.
That's beautiful. And it's also, you also feel your body. And I think you also, because it's your feet, you feel more grounded instantly. Because, I mean, yeah.
You can feel like, oh, I'm floating off in all kinds of scenarios of the future that freak me out.
Yeah.
And it grounds you. It brings, like, your feet are often ignored and they're very far away from our face. So we're not like looking at them or paying particular attention to them very often. And I find that doing that rooting, grounding you to your roots and going, right, I'm actually very stable. I'm very stable. That's the feeling that I get out of that. There's like, okay, and with all the chaos that's going on around me, stability is right here. Everything's right here. And the flow, shift, and no matter what environment you're in, we can't always go out barefoot walking in a forest. Like, I can often do that because I do live near a forest, but it creates a sense of like presence and safety that I find very empowering and calming. And I do that also with my son. When he's feeling a bit overwhelmed, we do it together. We both dip our feet in and we just go, oh, okay. Right, let's just sit in here and feel that for a while. And then, as long as we want, and then we take our feet out and shake and literally just shake it off.
It's beautiful. I will definitely try that. I have so many different answers to that question, but I never had somebody telling me, well, I just put my feet into water. It's beautiful. I really like it.
Just a dip in water. Water, there's so much meaning behind water, and we're not able to go out surfing or go swimming, but you can dip your feet in water, and I find it's something very powerful, and I find it very effective and highly recommend it.
Thank you so much for that beautiful interview and for all the information.
Thanks for sticking with me. I know there's a lot there.
It was a lot of information, but I think, people can contact you, can contact me, and I think it was just perfect.
Yeah, any questions? I really enjoy unpacking case studies. For me, it's quite fun. I like being a bit of a detective, a nutrition detective. So if anyone has scenarios that they've come across that something resonated with them that made them think of something and they have any questions, or they wanted to clarify anything that I mentioned that sort of resonated for them in whatever direction. So I've got bucket-loads of research and resources that if anyone's got specific questions that I can sort of help them go in a direction where they can explore that without having to do as much time investment in searching online. I have a lot of material that I'm very open to sharing, because when people tell me their stories, I'm also learning, and it's enhancing my ability to perceive and discover new ideas. So I'm very open to anyone contacting me.
Great. Thank you so much. I really hope you liked our conversation and learned a lot about how our body functions. It is so important to listen to that inner voice we all have. Our body is highly intelligent and knows best what's good for us. I will again put some very interesting links into the show notes for everybody who wants to learn more about this topic. And now I wish you a wonderful start into the new week.